What is up, guys, and welcome back to another one of my videos. If this is your first time checking me out, thank you for coming around. I appreciate it. Here on this channel we make some spicy meatballs. Deck profiles. We make deck profiles. I did a little poll in my shorts, did a little question. I said, what deck profile do you guys want me to do next? And the one that won first was Dragapult. But I was confused. What I meant was Regidrago Dragapult, so that is the video that we're going to be making today. I'm going to be teaching you the ins, the outs, what the deck wants to do, how to make that happen as efficiently as possible. So let's get right into the video. For this video, we're going to be using Alberto Conti's deck that he got first place in on November 22nd at the Polish Regional. I picked this deck for its crazy consistency and its ability to get everything that you need within the first couple of turns. So let's get into the deck profile. 3 Regidrago Vs, 3 Regidrago V-Star, 3 Teal Mask, 2 Dragapult, 1 Garantina V-Star, 1 Kyurem, 1 Squawkabilly, 1 Mew EX, 1 Pheasantipity, 1 Cleffa, and 1 Radiant Charizard. 4 Professor's Research, 3 Iono, 2 Boss's Orders, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Nest Ball, 4 Energy Switch, 4 Earthen Vessel, 2 Super Rod, 1 Canceling Cologne, 1 Prime Catcher, 1 Switch, 1 Temple of Sinnoh, and 1 Jamming Tower. And the fairly standard lineup of about 7 Grass Energies and 3 Fire Energies. To understand what these cards do in conjunction with one another, and to understand how the deck runs, you need to know exactly what the deck wants to do. The key objective of Regidrago V-Star deck is to get these set cards that I'm going to tell you in just one moment into the graveyard so that you can use Apex Dragon's ability in order to use their attacks whenever you want to. What makes this deck so good is its double utility using Teal Mask Ogrepon. We're going to go over Teal Mask here in just a second, but before you can understand how that card is really good, we need to go over the entire deck as a whole and get into the combos that the deck wants to do. First, we're going to take a look at the big boys themselves, Regidrago V and Regidrago V-Star. Regidrago V is a 220 health Dragon-type Pokemon with 2 attacks, and you will probably use both of them, honestly. The first one, Celestial Roar, is the better of the two for one particular reason we'll go into later. Celestial Roar reads, discard the top 3 cards of your deck. If any of those are energy cards, attach them to this Pokemon. And its damage dealing attack, Dragon Laser, is also really good. Dragon Laser takes 2 grass and a fire energy and deals 130 damage with the effect that says, this attack also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon without weakness or resistance. Celestial Roar does 2 jobs. First of all, it gets energy to Regidrago V because 2 grass and a fire energy, 3 energies is a commitment, right? But it also could potentially get good Pokemon into your discard pile. That's the beautiful thing about this deck. It doesn't really matter. Most of the mons, if you mill them, as long as you have some of your combo pieces on board, nothing really matters. Dragon Laser deals a good amount of damage while also applying pressure to your opponent's bench Pokemon. So with that being said, let's look at Regidrago V-Star. Regidrago V-Star has 1 attack that inherently doesn't deal any damage, but that doesn't matter because it is busted. It is so good. And that attack reads, choose an attack from a dragon Pokemon in your discard pile and use it as this attack. Yes, I do mean any dragon type Pokemon in your graveyard. You can use their attacks with this guy. That means that any other Dragapult deck that has to actually evolve to Dragapult, this deck says, why do any of that? Just send him to the discard pile and don't worry, boy, I got you. And the wildest thing about this deck, the craziest thing about this deck, is his V-Star ability is just as good. And his V-Star ability reads, during your turn, you may discard the top 7 cards of your deck, then put 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. And then, of course, you can't use more than 1 V-Star ability in a game. So let me read that to you one more time so it sinks in, because it's very important the way the text reads. During your turn, you may discard the top 7 cards of your deck, then put 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. Just so you know, that's any cards in your discard pile. It doesn't have to be the ones you just milled. This V-Star ability is the ultimate get a card back from your discard pile. It could be anything you want it to be. Do you need a Boss's Orders? Is it in your discard pile? Bam, there you go. Do you need your Canceling Cologne? Is it in your discard pile? Bam, there you go. It doesn't matter. You could even use it to further your combos, which I've done several times. Now, I know what you're thinking. 2 grass energy and a fire energy, how are you going to commit that to one Pokemon fast enough for it to really matter? And don't worry, we're going to go over that too, because this deck can do that super consistently. But in order to really understand what we're talking about, we need to look at Teal Mask Ogerpon. Teal Mask Ogerpon EX is a 210 grass type Pokemon with an ability and an attack you're definitely going to use. There's no question about it. We'll start with his ability, Teal Dance. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic grass energy from your hand to this Pokemon, and if you attached an energy in this way, you draw 1 card. It is very important to use Teal Mask Ogerpon's Teal Dance ability in order to get Regidrago his energies, and we're going to go over how he gets those energies in a second, but it's important that you commit those energies to Ogerpon, not only to draw the cards, because drawing is just as important as milling, but also to get the energies on Teal Mask to get to Regidrago. I mean, I literally just said that, so. His attack, Myriad Leaf Shower, is Chef's Kiss. It is a Charizard's worst nightmare. Let's go over it real quick. Myriad Leaf Shower takes 3 grass energies and does 30 plus damage. This attack does 30 more damage for each energy attached to both Pokemon. That means at base power, you're doing 120 damage. But if you're playing against a Charizard, you're doing an additional 60 more damage for their 2 fire energies, giving you a grand total of 180. Then times that by 2 for that sweet, sweet weakness for 360. This deck is Charizard's worst nightmare. And as a Charizard main, I can tell you that without a shadow of a doubt. I hate playing against this deck. Generally speaking, the energy you're going to be committing from hand is going to be your fire energy, so you don't really want to play your grass energies from hand to a Pokemon unless you're going for a big boy play. Now, with all that being said about those 2 very key cards, let's look at our mill targets. Those being Kyurem, Garantina V-Star, and of course, Dragapult EX. We're going to start with Dragapult EX, because let's be real, he's everybody's favorite, right? Dragapult EX is a 320 Dragon-type monster with 2 attacks, but you're only really going to be using 1 of them. And the attack you're going to be using, you guessed it, Phantom Dive. The energy cost for this attack does not matter because the energy cost has been paid via Apex Dragon, so all that really matters is the damage and the attack effect, so we're going to look at those real quick. Phantom Dive does 200 damage, and it says put 6 damage counters on your opponent's benched Pokemon in any way you like. That 60 damage could do anything from knocking out a basic Pokemon to get an extra prize, to applying pressure to your opponent's Pokemon so that they're a little bit more tender so you can knock them out a little easier next turn. 60 damage isn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it could make your opponent second guess sending out that EX Pokemon that they really want to clutch the game with. Next up on the chopping block, let's look at Garantina V-Star. Garantina V-Star is a 280 health Dragon-type Pokemon, and its attack is Lost Impact, and just like Dragapult, the energy requirement does not matter because it's been paid with Apex Dragon. Lost Impact is an attack that does 280 damage to 1 Pokemon, and while it doesn't have an ability, it does have a cost for using it. Put 2 energies attached to your Pokemon in the Lost Zone. 2 energies on Regidrago is a pretty stark commitment, honestly. But the card doesn't specify it has to be on Regidrago, so if you have it committed to other Pokemon on board, you can use those energies to pay this cost. Something that's super important to know about this is that as we use Apex Dragon, we can only use their attacks, not their V-Star powers. At least Pokemon TCG Live wouldn't allow me to use them. So I'm assuming that that will carry over and you won't be able to use them in a real life game either. Garantina is in this deck to deal big damage to 1 Pokemon to win you the game. Let's move on and look at Kyurem real quick. Kyurem's attack Trifrost is really good. But its heavy energy cost does make it situational. Nonetheless, let's read it out and see what it says. Trifrost reads, discard all energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 110 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, if you're playing against a deck that plays a lot of Stage 1 Pokemon or basic Pokemon that require a rare candy such as Charizard, it can be worth it to drop Trifrost to get rid of the Pidgeys and the Charmanders really early in the game to apply an intense amount of pressure for them to come back from that. Typically speaking, if you do drop a Trifrost on a deck that runs similar to Charizard, you have game if you can get rid of their big Pokemon that are going to end up being an issue, such as Pidgeot or Charizard. It will make keeping up with you almost impossible for them to do. I'm not saying that they can't do it, I'm just saying that it's going to cost them more resources, it's going to take more time, and those decks already are time consuming to play. So by the time that they're getting their Pokemon up and ready to go, you've probably already won the game or are in a position to win the game. So as we look through the trainers, and we've looked at the Celestial Roar, and we have the V-Star ability to mill, these are the 3 cards that you want to mill into your discard pile. Specifically, your main target is Dragapult because it applies a ton of pressure to your opponent while also dealing 200 damage to their active Pokemon. So if you do bump into a deck running Pidgey or something else that has low health that you know you can pick up an extra prize from while also making it more difficult for them to get traction, it's really good to use the Phantom Dive. Like, it's super good. It pretty much is a no-brainer, honestly. Squawkabilly, Mew, Fezandipity, and Cleffa are all consistency cards, with Fezandipity also being kind of a punishment. These cards allow you to draw into what you need to get Regidrago on board. And it also serves as being able to keep hand advantage over your opponent, which is always good in a card game. You always want to have more cards in hand than your opponent, because that means you have more options for plays in the future. Radiant Charizard is a last-ditch effort. 250 damage to any Pokemon, while you can't use it more than once in a row, is still a really good option because a lot of times it's going to take an EX Pokemon to withstand something like that. But I feel like most importantly, it's good for your mirror matches when you're playing against decks that are going to play Teal Mask Ogerpon. It will one-shot Teal Mask, and anytime you can keep your opponent from committing those energies and keeping them from getting more cards in hand than you do will always be an important play. Now, while a lot of the trainers are pretty much, you know what they do, it's important to know how they work with the other cards in this deck because they run double utility. They're not only getting cards in your hand, but they're also getting cards into your discard pile because getting these cards that you want into your discard pile in your hand breaks your hand up, and you don't want that to happen. So let's go over how to get those cards out of your hand and how to make your hand a little more consistent, a little more fluid. Ultra Ball allows you to search your deck for any Pokemon that you want, but it also takes 2 cards from your hand to be discarded in order to use it. So if you end up starting a game with a Garantina or a Dragapult in your hand and you really want to get them to the discard pile, Ultra Ball is one of the easiest ways to make that happen while also pulling something to your hand that can help you commit to your plays a little bit faster. For whatever reason, when I'm playing this deck, I always end up having a Regidrago V in hand, but I almost never draw into the V-Star, so what I'll end up doing is I'll end up tossing Dragapult or Garantina to the discard pile to pull my V-Star to hand, and then, immediately evolve it and then start doing some shenanigans. Professor's Research does something just as good, except for instead of pulling a Pokemon to your hand, you're drawing 7 fresh cards. As I'm sure you know if you're watching this video, drawing cards from your deck is really good, right? Having cards in hand, I hear that that's a pretty cool thing, but also sending those Pokemon to your graveyard is just as important because it doesn't really matter how many cards you have in hand if you can't get the play going, so getting those cards to the graveyard, really good. Nest Ball is for pretty much anything you need, whether it be Regidrago V or Mew or Squawkabilly, any of those targets are good. It's whatever you need in the moment for that particular card, while Super Rod also is kind of like, if you end up milling your V-Star Regidragos, it's kind of a lost cause. You can win games with Teal Mask, but you don't want to rely on Teal Mask to win games. So if you end up milling your V-Stars to the graveyard, you always have your Super Rods to pull those back to your deck. Cards like Temple of Sinnoh and Canceling Cologne and Jamming Tower are all tech picks. They will largely depend on what you're going to be playing at whatever event you're playing at. It's very important to know what decks you're expecting to see when you play an event. And because of that, maybe you might not want to run those cards when you're playing online, because online is a much bigger platform with a ton more decks, especially in the early game when you're playing in Pokeball Cup or Great Ball Cup. You could see pretty much anything. Those cards might not be super helpful against random decks you bump into. But if you are playing a regional level event, I would highly recommend running these cards because bumping into Cornerstone Ogerpon can be the death of this deck. There's not really much it can do to get over Cornerstone. Same with other cards like Mimikyu and anything from the Lugia Stall deck. Things like that, Trollsy things like that, Canceling Clone, Jamming Towers, and Temple of Sinnoh are all really good picks for those things. Now, if you're watching this video post-Surging Sparks, you might be like, you know what sounds like a good idea? Let's put Blender in this deck. But the thing is that if you play Blender as your ace spec, all you're really doing is winning harder, and this deck already has a really big issue we're about to go over here in just a second that makes me lose more oftentimes than playing against actual people does. Earthen Vessel is used to pull energies for whatever you need in that moment. That could be a fire energy for Regidrago or grass energies for Teal Mask. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is that you're playing it for what you need in the moment. The last card we're going to talk about is probably the most important trainer for this deck, and that card is Energy Switch. Energy Switch just allows you to move your energies around your Pokemon, and this one simple card is one of the reasons why this deck is so consistent. Typically what you'll do is you'll commit 2 Teal Mask Ogerpons to board, use both of their Teal Dances, and then use an Earthen Vessel to pull your Fire energy and a Grass energy. At that point, all you really need are energy switches and you're ready to fight. So you use your energy switch to commit your 2 Grass energy to your Regidrago, play your Fire energy from hand, and then at that point, you're just trying to get your Dragapults in the graveyard. You're ready to go. The reason why this deck tops to me is very evident. You see, when you're playing a card game, there are basically 3 pillars that you want your deck to follow in order to know whether or not it's going to be a top contending deck. How much of the abilities can you utilize, how consistent is the deck, and how well do the cards synergize with one another. And in every single aspect, Regidrago Dragapult does a phenomenal job. It's really, really rare that you end up bricking in the early game, but more importantly, even if you do, there's nothing in your hand that you have to be afraid to get rid of. And that's a part of what makes this deck so good. The other 2 decks that I've talked about on this channel have an issue where sending something to the discard pile could mean the difference between winning or losing, but Regidrago doesn't have that problem. But we've gushed about this deck a lot today, so let's talk about the things that you're going to have a hard time with when you're playing this deck. The number one thing, please God, the number one thing is you have to keep an eye on how many cards you have in your deck. This is especially important if you're playing online. Because this deck is so consistent and it does its job so efficiently, you will end up going through most of the cards in your deck within just a couple of turns. And you don't want to be that guy that ends up committing all these awesome Pokemon to your board only to find out you've only got 3 cards left in your deck and they've got 6 prizes, and at this point there's no possible way you're going to win. You're going to deck out. It's important to know when you're playing this deck when to go full speed ahead and when to back up. Because if I'm being honest, you beating yourself is the only real way you can lose with this deck. Regidrago V-Star has no inherent decks that it is going to lose against. There is no deck as of right now, November of 2024, that you're going to bump into out in the wild that you think, oh God, this is going to be a terrible matchup because they've got, I have weakness to whatever they're playing or something to that effect. The deck is powerful, the deck is consistent, and it has a plethora of abilities and effects to make it even better as the game goes on. And that's why I think until the letter fall off, Regidrago V-Star will be the top contending deck. Anyway, thank y'all for coming out and checking out my channel. I really do appreciate it. I am going to make another deck profile. It's going to be Roaring Thunder. Oh man, that was so funny. I loved getting called out for that. Raging Bolt will be the next deck that we talk about. The next video that we talk about is going to be something a little along the lines of card theory and how I think that these simple principles will really help you as a card player. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Leave a like, leave a subscribe. I make content. Hopefully you like it. If you've made it this far, you at the very least like my voice. So thank you for checking me out. I'll catch y'all in the next video. Take it easy, guys.